Well, it says it is, but you know, take it or leave it for what it's worth. Good evening. Good evening. Good to be here. If y'all don't mind, we'll start. I mean, it don't matter to me. It don't matter to me. If you didn't get a copy of the bulletin from last Sunday, I want you to do that. And by the way, if you support a Haitian school student and you like to send them a letter, it's kind of a detailed way to do it, but it's in the bulletin. You put the name of your student and all of that, but it's in there. We got a lot coming up the end of the month. Trunk or treat the 27th, 31st. It's Youth Sunday that morning. That afternoon is our fall hayride and wiener roast at 5, and then Ozark Revival concert at 7 o'clock. So that's all the announcements I know of. Any other announcements? Anything I missed? Y'all gonna be this way tonight, huh? All right, let's go over a prayer list together then. I'm going to update a few that I know that's been added through the prayer groups and some that I've heard about. And then if you have anyone you want to add or update us on, I'd like to hear from you all because I don't always know everything. I heard from Jake Hoosier, and they were taking Boker back to get retested because they think they had a false negative. But I haven't heard the results of that yet. But they said he was doing good. But I did hear, I talked to Miss Mary Ellen Hoosier. She's doing okay. Keep praying for her. She's coughing a lot, but it's a productive cough, if you know what I mean. But she did tell me their other granddaughter, Ella, has got COVID.
So does Cassie.
So Cassie's got it too.
She tested negative, but she's got it.
Okay.
She's sick.
Okay. Well, I don't trust all the testing.
Is it Ellen? Is that Davis?
Yeah,
Is it Ellie or Ella?
Ella. All right, we were asked to pray for Sarah Snodgrass. She hurt her knee, and I did not get a later update. The last I heard, they were still going for a second opinion.
They got the second opinion, and the doctor says that he feels the same as the first one, and they were supposed to go for an MRI today.
Okay, so we don't have the results of the MRI yet. All right. We were asked to pray for Carol Buckmaster. She attended some of our evening classes or afternoon classes. She used to live in this area, but she had a major stroke. So we need to pray for her. Anna Cheatham, surgery went really well. She thanked everybody through us for prayers. Keep praying for her. She's got about 3 months recuperation from back surgery. It's good to see Merle here Sunday. Keep praying for Miss Merle. I haven't got an update on Laura Parton since Sunday afternoon, but Laura's numbers were improving. She was still on the vent, but her numbers were improving. We're thankful for that. Miss Marilyn is still at Mayo. We talk to her about every other day. She had some more tests to do, and then they would, I think it was Monday, they were supposed to meet to get the results and see what they could do. Keep praying for Jared Sams. We heard he's doing a lot better, all right? That's the word that, Holly. Yeah, it'll come to me. Don't worry about me, all right? Keep praying for Kirkwood and all of their family. He's got a lot of rehabbing to do. Going to be a long haul. Audie Ramsey has moved from boot camp to another 29-day training, and you keep praying for Audie. Miss Snodgrass, it was good to see Miss Snodgrass at church Sunday. She's doing okay. Didn't Mandy P ask prayer for her daughter, or am I thinking wrong? Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't know. Have any update? Anybody heard anything on Jennifer? Jennifer Loveless Chandler. Keep praying for Jonelle and Austin Crawley. Miss Joyce is doing so good. We talked to her the other night, and she's just top of the line. She feels 100% better. But keep praying for her daughter who's going to have surgery. And I was driving, and I didn't write the daughter's name down. Kelly? Shelly? Oh, I wasn't sure what the name was. But y'all keep praying for her. Her surgery's coming up. All right, who else?
I saw Amber sends back on Facebook, she's doing very good, so
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Trini. Anyone else?
my friend Whitney Smithford, her mom passed away.
Thank you. Couldn't think of her last name, the Swinford family. Anyone else? Anyone that's... Marilyn says doctor's meetings tomorrow all day. So heading home late tomorrow afternoon. So I know she's ready to be home, but pray that they have answers. That's the most important thing. Is anybody thankful for the rain? I kind of thought I'd get a little bit of rise out of y'all on that. If I miss someone, please feel free to tell us. Okay.
Have you heard anything else on Ben's?
He's supposed to come home. He's got to be able to walk on his own. And I haven't talked to Ricky this week. Ricky's been going back and forth to the doctor for some tests. It's that time of the year. When you get to be an older person, you have to go. All minds clear? And let's pray before we open the Bible to Romans chapter 8, beginning in verse 5, please. Gerald Kidd, lead a prayer for us, please, sir.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for everything you've done for us, Father. Thank you for the rain.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the opportunity to read and come here tonight. Search the word. Without you, just keep us on the prayer list, Father. I just pray that you would be with each and every one of them, the family, Father. Get comfort, kind of comfort that only you can give, Father. Thank you for the comfort that you sent to us. I ask that you be with us as we go into Romans, Father, and let everything all grow. Just put us into our everyday life, Father. Do this once a day, once a week, or twice a week. Do this every day, Father.
Yes, Lord.
Praise you and thank you in Christ's name.
Amen. Well, I enjoyed services Sunday, and I want you to pray for services again. This Sunday, I'm going to be preaching from Revelation 22 again. So I'm looking forward to it. Lord willing, if he doesn't change my mind, I hope he doesn't. Anyway, Romans chapter 8, and we started this section in verse number 5 last week, and we didn't get very far, but that's okay. You know, I was thinking about this as I read over it again. If you read Romans chapter 7 and you stopped and you saw all of the admitted failures that Paul said about himself, which, if we were all in agreement and we were all honest, apply to every single one of us. You know, the things I hate, I end up doing. The things I don't want to do, I do. What I know I ought to do, I don't always do them. And if you stop there, you wouldn't appreciate the ministry and the power of the Holy Spirit. So I know Paul wrote this by inspiration of the Holy Spirit. But he kind of set us up. So he brought us all through that. We saw how he believed he was. We see ourselves in that. And then when we get to Romans chapter 8, and I love the first verse, in spite of all that, now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. All right? We already talked about the fact that in chapter 8, the Holy Spirit is mentioned 19 times, and that is primarily what this chapter is about, all that the Holy Spirit does for us as he is in us. And you need to remember, and you need to thank God every day, that when you get saved, you have as much of the Holy Spirit as you need on that day. But listen, we can quench him, we can grieve him, and sometimes we need to be asked to be filled with the Holy Spirit again. It's not that he left, we just need him to be working. I think that's a good euphemism, a good term to describe the feeling is we need him to be working in our lives once again. If we put ourselves on the throne, our jobs on the throne, our hobbies on the throne, whatever else we put on the throne of our lives that takes the place of God in our lives, he's not going to be content. He'll just sit back in the corner, and he's not going to leave us. We've already established that. But he'll sit back in the corner and wait till we need him. Because I know a lot of people, and I know it's happened in my own life, sometimes it takes a crisis experience, and we find ourselves isolated from the world and sometimes from people. And most of the time when that happens, we end up flat on our back. And the only place you have to look when you're flat on your back is up to God. All right, we know that. All right. So the title for this study in these verses 5 through 13, has to do with the difference that the Holy Spirit makes in our lives. And last time we talked about the difference the Holy Spirit makes in our mind. And I don't know if I said this last week. I can't remember because sometimes I get off chart and I don't go according to my notes all the time. But we're told over and over again in the Bible and reminded about our minds. And if you'll recall, when Satan first came to Eve to deceive her, he attacked her thought process. What did he say? Yea, hath God said? And he put a seed of doubt in front of her, and she jumped on it. So she started thinking down the wrong path. All right? So if Satan can plant some seed in our mind, evil thoughts, evil actions, and they're already inside of us, all right? But he cultivates them through a thought process, and he doesn't have a control over our mind, but through circumstances, a lot of times through people, all right? And, you know, I remember seeing the cartoons growing up. You know, you got an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, and angel's whispering in one ear and the devil's whispering in the other ear. I don't believe that's true. But the forces of evil are at work in and around us every single day. And you don't have to go very far to find it, all right? In fact, you can find it in some churches. I know that. So there's this contrast that exists between the natural person, a person that's not saved, and a person who's been transformed, their minds, a mind that's been transformed by the Spirit of God. Excuse me. So tonight I want to look at the second point under the Spirit, the difference the Spirit makes in the mind, and it has to do with the direction that our minds are changed. But I want to read these verses again, 5 through 13, Romans chapter 8. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh. After would have to refer to being in pursuit of it, all right? Or at least it's controlling and dominating our lives. And by the way, if you'll look back and remember when we taught a few months back and we were in the book of 1 Corinthians, he described three different kind of people. He described a natural man, and a natural man's not saved. A natural person's not saved. They're completely and totally controlled and dominated by their flesh. They're not saved, so when they die, they're going to go to heaven. Not go to heaven, they're going to go to hell. Then he talked about the spiritual man. A spiritual man is somebody that's been saved, and they're controlled, led, and dominated by the Holy Spirit. He gives direction, and they follow direction of the Holy Spirit in their lives. But he mentioned that carnal person. And a carnal person has been saved. And when they die, they too will go to heaven. But although they've been saved, they're not living on a spiritual plane, and the flesh still controls, dominates, and influences their lives. All right? So he says in verse 5, they who are after the flesh are minding the things of the flesh, but they are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be, here's that word, carnally. It means fleshly. To be carnally minded is death. But to be spiritually minded, life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God. You know, I've heard that word all my life, and I've always just correlated it with meaning enemy. But it goes deeper than that, all right? Looked it up. It means to have a deep hostility towards, all right? We could look at someone and say, well, they're our enemies, but I don't have any deep-rooted, deep-seated hostility toward them. But that's literally what the word means. For the carnal mind is hostile against God, because it is not subject to the law of God, neither can be. So that they that are in the flesh cannot please God. But you're not in the flesh, you're in the Spirit. If so be that the Spirit of God dwells in you. Now, if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he's not one of his. And if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken you, which means to make you alive, to make alive your mortal bodies by his Spirit that dwelleth in you. That, brethren, therefore, brethren, we are debtors not to the flesh to live after the flesh. For if you live after the flesh, you'll die. But if you live through the Spirit to mortify the deeds of the body, you shall live. So we were talking about the mind and the difference the Holy Spirit makes in the minds of believers. We talked about the fact that the desires of the mind are changed. I want to talk tonight about the direction of our minds. All right, the directions. In this verse, Paul states a fact about the carnal mind. That is, a mind focused on things that pertain to the flesh. And he says you're dead. He's not talking about potential. He's merely stating an equation, a truth. To have a carnal mind means death. All right? And if you want to know more about that, go read Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. You're dead in trespasses and sin. It talks about that. All right. But to have a mind that is focused on God and things above, all right? Set your affections on things above, not on things of earth. It proves, it's a proof in us, it's an evidence in us that we've been saved by grace and we're walking in the Spirit. And I want to turn over and read some verses in the book of Colossians chapter 3, if you'll bear with me just a minute. Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. If you then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sits on the right hand of God. Set your affection on things above, not on things on this earth, for you are dead, and your life is hid with Christ. When Christ, who is our life, shall appear, then you shall also appear with him in glory. All right? Now, I realize that in the verse that we referred to, back in Romans chapter 8, it's verse number 6. It has to do with the here and now. But setting our affections on things above, all right, that means where our desires are, where our lives are. And I know a lot of people that have lived their life completely and teetotally pursuing materialism, the desires of the flesh, to satisfy and fulfill the flesh in whatever ways that made them happy, and they ignored the Holy Spirit in their lives. You know, I have sat at a distance, and I've known several people who gave their lives to God in mission work, to be missionaries. And I've watched, and I'll tell you truthfully, as a person, I have looked at some of those people and I have thought, this is just from human reasoning, God, you could have done better. You know, God, why'd you pick him? You know, why'd you choose him? Someone else had a lot more potential. But listen, God doesn't choose according to potential. God chooses on what he can make of us as we yield ourselves to him. Brother Marvin Lloyd was a great missionary for our missionary Baptist work for years. And I ran into Brother Marvin, in the last year sometime, and he didn't hardly know who I was, which hurt my heart because he's known me all my life, and I've known him all my life. But Brother Marvin surrendered to preach as a teenage boy out in western Oklahoma. He went to school with my mom and dad. And Daddy told me when Marvin got up to preach his first sermon, he walked up and laid his Bible down, and he just leaned over on the pulpit, and he just talked a little while. And when they left, Dad and them thought, Marvin ain't going to make it. I want to tell you something, folks. Marvin made it because he yielded himself to God. I mean, he left western Oklahoma. He moved to Central Arkansas. He went to Central Baptist College. He went to the University of Central Arkansas. He got a degree, and then he left, and he went on to seminary, and God used him greatly. He learned how to fly an airplane. He learned how to build airplanes and how to work on airplanes, and God used him greatly, all right? People whose desires, their affections, the things they love, what they want most, that are set on him, that's the people God uses. He doesn't choose always the brightest, those with the most potential, those that the world thinks can and will or could do great things. He just chooses people who are willing to be used of him. And I'll tell you, I think that there's going to be a lot of people who are saved, and they're going to get to heaven, and they're going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ, and they're going to realize how much they gave up because they weren't willing to allow God to use them. They said, I can't. I'm not capable. I'm not able. But they wouldn't allow God to use them. All right. Anybody got a comment? I don't know why I took my glasses off. I'm going to need them again. I got to preach it a little bit. So let's look at verse 7. This has to do with the devotions of our mind. Paul tells us in this verse that the carnal mind is the enmity is hostile toward God. Why is that true? Because, listen, here's the answer. Why is it true that the carnal mind is hostile toward God? Because the carnal mind wants us to be God. If you look around in our world today, humanism has become basically the world religion. It's not cataloged. It's not identified by that name. But if you don't think that we have deified humanity, put ourselves, our desires, our wants, our needs, and listen, folks, as a nation, for the most part, we've taken our eyes off of God. And I'm going to say this, people sit around and wring their hands and say, I don't know what's this world come to. I can tell you what the world's come to. We took our eyes off God. That's right. All right? We've deified and worshiped man. We've exalted man. And it's been going on for a while. So it has to do with the devotion of our mind. The carnal mind desires to be God. Years and years ago, there was a little gospel tract that went out, and it was great. And I wish I had one of them, and I could remember all the illustrations. But it showed a picture of a chair, and it was supposed to represent a throne. And then it showed a picture of a stick person, one of us, and it showed a picture of God. And you made the decision who was going to sit on the throne of your life. Either you are or God is. All right? And if you don't seek God's direction, you don't seek God's face, you don't seek God's will, and it's all about you, what you want, what you're going to do, I can tell you who's sitting on the throne of your life, if that's your thought process, and that's the way you are. So I'm not talking about people who are lost, because people who are lost, their mind is completely and totally opposed everything to do with God and his will. I'm talking about people who are saved. I'm talking about people who are saved who've never thought, what does God want to do with me? I've told y'all about my friend. In fact, some of y'all remember Brother Harley Ulbrich preached for us years and years ago. I met Harley Ulbrich in Kansas when I worked up there for a couple of years, and we became good friends. Harley surrendered to preach in his early 60s. The Lord had been calling him to preach since he was 16. And it's a wonder God didn't kill him in that time frame. But when he finally surrendered to preach, everybody said, the Lord can't use him. Look at him. See how old he is? He's waited. And Harley had done great things. He was a deacon in the church. He'd served as secretary in the church. He led people to Christ. He owned businesses. He gave lots of money to the churches that he'd been a part of. But he still wasn't doing what God wanted him to do. Harley started pastoring a little church up there. He ended up in Northwest Arkansas pastoring a church. And Harley wanted to be a missionary. He wanted to go to Cassville, Missouri and start a church. So he applied for mission status, and they wouldn't hire him because he was too old. All right? So Brother Harley did it on his own. And he went up there, and he found a building somewhere outside of Cassville in the middle of nowhere, basically, and it was an old restaurant. He went in there and cleaned the thing up and opened it up and got some chairs in there, and he started having church. And I went up and preached a revival for him. And this has been years. This is back in the 80s, all right? I didn't know what to expect. I'd talked to him, but I had no idea. Man, I got down there to that little church that night, and that thing was jam-packed full of people. And he had a gospel singing group from Kansas in. That place was rocking, man. We had a meeting. We had a meeting every night that week. Why could God take somebody who had resisted him that long and then turn around and use him? What's the key? What's the answer?
He had the foreknowledge of knowing that he was going to surrender pretty soon.
He did, and God still chose to use him, You know, if you cataloged all the people in the New Testament who had baggage, and I hear that all the time, and by the way, I take a beating on that personally myself from some people all the time. But if you threw out everybody in the New Testament that had baggage that God chose to use and said, oh, you can't use him. If you'd have told God, you told Jesus, oh, you can't use them. You can't use that one, and you pointed out all their negative qualities, there wouldn't have been many people left. I mean, you just think about the apostles. We know about Peter. Peter was boisterous. He was controlled by the flesh. It was evidenced in his life. It was evidenced in his talk. He carried that sword with him, which would be equivalent to carrying a gun, and he was willing to use it at the right time because he did. But then you look at James and John. They were called the sons of thunder. Where do you think that came from? Wasn't because they were riding motorcycles, all right? And their own mama came and said, Lord, when you get into heaven, would you let one of my boys sit on your right and one on the left? Thomas, what was Thomas' problem? He was always doubting God. I mean, they all had baggage, but God chose to use them. Why? Because they were available. When God said, follow me, they said, okay. And they dropped what they did and they followed him. So it has to do with the devotions of our mind.
Well, and you're just talking about a guy right now, right? Paul. I mean,
Well, yeah.
that guy is the furthest thing from you.
Yeah.
So what did you think?
When the Holy Spirit grabbed him on the road to Damascus, and the Lord started talking to him, can you imagine? I mean, I can't even begin to comprehend what he thought and what he felt. Saul, why persecutest thou me? Is it hard to kick against the goat? You talking to me, God? Comments. I want to stop and say here, and I'm not making excuses. I'm just want to remind you, no matter how close you draw to God. And by the way, there's a verse in James, I believe, that says, draw nigh to God, and he'll draw nigh to you. All right? So that's it's a conditional promise. All right? I've heard old preachers say it means what it says. If you take one step closer to God, he'll draw closer to you. All right? It has to do with desire. And by the way, if that's what you want, that's what you'll get. I remember when I first surrendered to preach. I surrendered to preach on August the 10th, I believe. I'd have to go back and count it up again. 1973. I'd already enrolled at Central Baptist College because I knew I was going to surrender to preach. I just hadn't done it yet. So I went away. The Sunday that I surrendered to preach, I went away and I moved into the dorm. I hadn't even preached my first sermon yet. Man, I was on fire. But I got to looking around them. There was a lot of them young people that were on fire for God. But I noticed as the semester dragged on, and Western Civ, and English 1, and all of those classes, History of the Baptist, New Testament survey, Old Testament survey. Being in Central Baptist College wasn't near as much fun as it was the first 2 weeks we were there, okay? But isn't that true, that whole ideology? Isn't that comparative and true in our own Christian lives? I heard Gerald Mitchell say one time from our pulpit in that old building, he said, I wish I could go back and get saved all over again and feel the way I felt when I first got saved. Why don't we? Why don't we?
What you talk about, we've quenched that, or we don't allow that to fill us back up, right?
Well, we get wrapped up in the world. And there's nothing wrong. We've got to make a living. We've got to provide for our family. You know, we've got to have a place to live. We've got to have food to eat. And we put all of those things, and I'm going to preach just a minute, all right? We put all of those things in the forefront. But Jesus said, don't worry about those things. He said, those things, I'll take care of you. But we put that, go ahead.
Well, that's why it's so important to be here on Wednesday night.
Well, come on, preach, Darren. Speak up where everybody can hear you.
Well, because you've been out in the world and you get beat up all week, right? Well, then you got to come back in and get rejuvenated, right? This is the oasis that you come into to get back on again, right? Because if you don't, eventually it continues to kick you in the teeth, and for long, it is what you said. You're beat down, and you can't get back up. So, yeah, that's why it's vitally important to be here.
I was listening to someone preach one time about the whole subject of foot washing. And you know that in biblical times, New Testament times, they wore sandals. And they walked pretty much everywhere they went unless they had a donkey or some other beast of burden to ride. And their feet got dirty. And when they come in the house, if they came in their own house, they took their shoes off at the door. If they had a servant or they went to a guest's house, the guest, if they went as a guest to someone else's house, someone would wash their feet. And that is such a picture of us in this world today. We're walking around in a dirty world. And our feet may not necessarily get dirty, and I don't check people's feet at the door, all right? But we do get dirty from the world because the world rubs off on us, all right? And like you were saying, Brother Darren, we go out in the world, we live in the world, we work in the world, we try not to be of it, but it gets on us sometimes, all right? And I want to say again, and I'm not making excuses, that's not to say we're ever going to be perfect. But this idea of being transformed means it's a daily process, and we're growing. And sometimes we slide back. By the way, that's a good old-fashioned revival word right there, backsliding. You don't hear much about it anymore. I could preach on backsliding. In fact, I did just a few months back. I was looking through my notes for this year, and I preached on the anatomy of a fall, and I mentioned backsliding, and people looked at me like, what's that mean? What's he talking about? Because you don't hear it anymore. It's a good, I remember when people backslid and they went in the world, they come to church on Sunday and they get under conviction by the Holy Spirit and they come before the church and say, I want to rededicate my life to the Lord. We didn't have to know what they did. We didn't ask what they did. We're just glad that they wanted to be better than they were. But, well, don't get me talking. What'd you say, Miss Sharon? No, we don't get it. No. Sometimes it's difficult just to wake people up around here on Sundays. I didn't name any names. All right, what is today's date? All right, so I want to remind you, trunk or treat is 2 weeks from tonight. And it's marked on that board out there as 7. I'm going to see if we can change that to 7:15 so we have time to do our prayer deal and we can be in the scripture just a little bit. But I hadn't got a chance to talk to Joel. I saw Joel about 5 minutes before we started tonight. All minds clear? Mary Ann, your friends are having a service here on the 23rd, all right? What's your, Whitney? Whitney was saved when the power team was here, wasn't she? All right, Whitney, her friend got saved when the power team was here. And they're going to do a memorial service for Whitney's mom. All right, Wanda Swinford, the 23rd in the afternoon. And I know y'all will help provide to feed that family. Any word before we dismiss? Yes.
Geraldine McReynolds that's on our prayer list. My friend from Christmas Road. We need to pray.
Okay. Geraldine McReynolds. Okay. Thank you for reminding us. Anybody else got anything? Pray for Sunday services. Pray for your pastor. All right, Ron, dismiss us in prayer, please, sir.